Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to each and every one of you. Welcome to this insightful webinar entitled From Testimony to Truth, What Corruption Inquiries Really Reveal About Organisational Ethics. South Africa has, over the past decade and more, developed a distinct institutional reflex. When something goes wrong, particularly around corruption, the response is often to establish a commission of inquiry. It's a bit of a knee-jerk reaction. From the far-reaching work of the Zondo Commission into state capture, to sector-specific inquiries across public entities and municipalities, to the current Matlanga Commission of Inquiry into criminality, political interference, and the corruption in the criminal justice system. These processes have become a defining feature of our accountability landscape. On the other hand, commissions of inquiry are essential instruments of transparency. They surface facts, give voice to whistleblowers and affected stakeholders, and create a public record of wrongdoing that would otherwise remain obscured. They can strengthen democratic accountability and contribute to the development of legal and governance frameworks. And yet, their proliferation raises difficult and necessary questions. What does it say about organizational ethics and leadership when commissions become the default response rather than the exception? Why do so many failures require retrospective investigation instead of being prevented through robust governance, ethical culture, and effective oversight? And perhaps more importantly, what happens after the findings? Do commissions really lead to meaningful accountability and reform? Or do they risk becoming costly exercises that expose wrongdoing without fundamentally changing the systems that enabled it? This webinar invites us to move beyond the headlines and into deeper reflection, not only on the scale of corruption and institutional failure, but on what these inquiries reveal about ethical culture, governance maturity, and the effectiveness of our accountability measures and mechanisms. Excuse me. I am Liesl Groenewald, the CEO of the Ethics Institute, and it is a real pleasure to acknowledge our supporters and sponsors, as well as attendees from 25 countries, including Greece, Spain, Australia, the United Arab Emirates, Canada, Nigeria, Eswatini, Benin, and China. This really illustrates our global footprint. The session today will take the form of an expert dialogue, deftly moderated by my colleague, Dr. Lincoln Cave, who will be assisted in the background with our Fatima Rawat and Narisha Kamfer. Thank you in advance to all of you. We are extremely privileged to have one of the best investigative journalists in South Africa in our midst today. But before I introduce him, I want to remind you all of the same. Life happens when you are making other plans. And of course, that is indeed what happened. So you will see on the invitation that, or the brochure that was sent for this webinar, that it stated that Jeff Weeks will be joining us today. But unfortunately, he had to withdraw because life happened. And then the colleague who agreed to be on the panel today, Kyle Cowan, life also happened there, and he had to withdraw about half an hour ago because of urgent court applications this morning. But we are thankful that we still have Sikonathi Mantshantsha, who is also a journalist at News 24 Investigations. And Sikonathi is a graduate of the Management Advancement Program at Wits Business School. He started his career at Great Securities as a messenger then bonds and equities trainee trader, before taking a position at UBS Investment Bank as a trade support analyst. In February 2004, Sikonathi became the chief editorial researcher at Media 24 for Who's Who in Southern Africa, after which he joined FinWeek magazine and Fin24.com as a financial journalist for 5 years. Sikonathi is the former deputy editor of the Financial Mail, an energy and investment writer for Business Day and associate editor of Scorpio, the investigating arm of Daily Maverick, where his field of specialization was the energy sector with a particular bias towards South Africa's state-owned enterprises. In 2017, he won the prestigious Sanlam Financial Journalist of the Year award for a series of stories exposing corruption and governance malpractices at Eskom, and that is South Africa's power utility. And that was for, among other areas that he covered. In 2023, Sikonathi won the National Press Club Spokesperson of the Year award, and in 2025, the Taupo Cape Journalist of the Year award, which is the most prestigious journalism award in South Africa. And he won this for an investigative series of stories on the environment and the economy. The same year, Sikonathi also won, among others, the National Press Club's Journalist of the Year award. Now, Sikonathi will be joined by our Chris Dobie, who found out about 10 minutes ago that he is part now of the panel discussion. And Chris is the Executive for Organisational Ethics at the Ethics Institute, which is based in Pretoria, and he is also there in South Africa. His fields of interest include corruption prevention, conflict of interest, management, and artificial intelligence ethics. Chris has worked with the South African government on numerous policy projects since 2005, including developing the South African Local Government Anti-Corruption Strategy and the Code for Ethical Leadership in Local Government. Chris has authored or co-authored various publications, including the South African Citizens Bribery Survey, the Public Sector Survey, the Conflict of Interest Handbook in 2023, and the Guidebook on Managing Ethics of AI in Organizations last year. And as it is with business ethicists, we come from various backgrounds, and Chris is no stranger in that regard because he holds a degree in landscape architecture, of all things, from the University of Pretoria, as well as an MPhil in workplace ethics, cum laude, from the same institution. We cannot be in better hands. I ask you to give our experts a round of virtual applause, please. Virtual applause. And then, Lincoln, I hand over to you at the moment. Thank you. There's the virtual applause. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Liesel Groenewald. Good morning to you all and a warm welcome on this cold starting of winter in South Africa for those who are connecting from far and wide beyond our geographical boundaries, South Africa. My name is Lincoln Cave. I'm also attached to the Ethics Institute as executive responsible for organizational ethics. And it falls on my shoulders to champion this session on a very topical issue, really. Now, to start us off, I need to emphasize that for those that don't know from abroad, we have 2026 representing really 30 years plus of our constitution, the apex law in the country. And the build-up to it commenced in 1993, really, with the interim constitution to build our democratic dispensation. And what was anchored in that was that moral duty has to be elevated on the same platform as legal obligations to those tasked with stewarding institutions as the executive and institutional functionaries. What happened since then? And I think this is fundamental why we find ourselves meeting today on this platform. Because we have, as the CEO highlighted, transitioned from a point where commissions of inquiry have become really part of the South African governance landscape. More so because the ethical and legal standards of accountability, least of all, remain the missing dimension for institutional leaders and functionaries to contribute to the effective and ethical governance of state institutions. Now, to discuss this theme on this webinar, From Testimony to Truth, what corruptions really reveal about organizational ethics, we are truly honored to have two formidable individuals. However, we had to move chairs, play musical chairs, but we're in good hands. So they will assist us really to unpack the theme by addressing two dimensions of this webinar in our discussion. One of it is where we'll really share the deliberation on institutional capture and ethical collapse. And then Sikonathi will take us through engaging his thoughts and experience on rebuilding ethical state institutions, anchored also hopefully by Chris sharing some of his thoughts around that. But for purpose of protocol, I invite the attendees really to please use the chat box for your posting your questions and comments, because ultimately we are looking forward to an engaging session with you. And at the opportune time, my colleagues that is coordinating that process will also assist in that regard. To start us off then, dealing Sikonathi and Chris with the first theme, institutional capture and ethical collapse. Now, what really comes to mind is if we look at how the evolution of our democratic governance process has emerged for us to be really having an extended governance landscape called commissions, it seems like we are really confronted with the reality of ethical drift, meaning that those normative standards that are anchored in our constitution as prescripts, two of them that's fundamental. One, professional ethics must be promoted. And the second one is that accountability in how we steer these institutions have become really the question marks. So if we then deal with the erosion of these normative standards and ethical values in organizations, and for us on this platform, we're dealing then with the current commission, but also how others have evolved over time to really give us that understanding that it seems like we have set a norm standard, an acceptable norm, that the erosion of ethical standards where individuals, organizations move away from professional, moral, or safety boundaries to the point where even issues such as conflict of interest cannot be articulated clearly, where issues such as accountability by the accounting officer in managing and making sure that the governing under, for example, the Public Financial Management Act is properly steered in organizations, that debates come in to say, but how do we ensure that I still get myself appointed if there are these risks? So with that said, Sikonathi, maybe the first question to you, what early warning signs were visible but ignored when we find ourselves really with the situation of the institutional capture and ethical collapse that brought about the commission, the Madlanga Commission and the ad hoc parliamentary commission to deliberate on institutional governance matters?
I think we need to go back to the beginning in order to be where we are. Learned people normally say, to know the end, you must look at the beginning. The collapse, not just in one institution or even the SAPS, or you can choose any element of the state, starting in parliament. It goes right back to about 32 years ago when this constitution that we adopted and celebrated as the best in the world turns out in my humble opinion, to not be so good, as it concentrates power in politicians, in political parties. No individual can be held accountable because we do not vote for individuals, we vote for political parties. So a collective, and therefore, if everyone is in charge, nobody is in charge. That gives the power to the leaders of the political parties, first to take their yes men and women to parliament and ensure that they neutralize any active supervision, neuter the role of parliament. It starts all the way there. You have seen how many people, how many vocal MPs stand out and say, no, I'm not going to be part of this, and they get chopped out. But let's then get to the point where things really started going down and that nobody could ignore it. When Jacob Zuma became president of the ANC, the first thing they did is kill all accountability methods. The biggest was the scorpions. You take away the fear, the consequences, the accountability, and you put yes men where you want them. And you have an executive president vested with so much power, but with very little control mechanism. There is not, until recently, even a committee of parliament that supervises the presidency. That's where it all starts. But these individuals, in other democracies, for example, in America, the finance minister gets interviewed by parliament, and they have to convince parliament that they are fit to do the job, and that goes to the foreign and defense ministers and other people. In South Africa, the president can wake up and appoint whom they want tomorrow, give no reasons, and dismiss who they want tomorrow, give no reasons. Then it went directly to institutions. The National Police Commissioner, go all the way back to Thabo Mbeki when he appointed Jackie Selebi, who absolutely had no interest in policing, had no experience, was actually a very questionable character within the ANC in exile way back then. That's where it all started. No one could say no to the president. No parliament could say no. And you can, Lincoln, go at any appointment that has been made in public institutions by politicians. That's where it all started. Where are they today?
Thank you, Sikonathi. You have triggered, so much, and I want to park you because we're still going to make sure that the opportunity that you afford us to engage you. But one thing that you have highlighted is when no one is in charge, everyone is in charge. And that leads me to you, Chris. What role then did fear, patronage, or hierarchy play? And why did governance frameworks, in your opinion, fail despite strong regulations?
Thanks, Lincoln. It's. I want to agree with Sikonathi. The genesis of this goes back a long way. I was once in Mozambique many years ago, and I spoke to someone there, and he said there's nowhere that a political party hasn't tried and succeeded a political party in charge hasn't tried and succeeded to convert its political power into financial power. And I think that came to a head under the Zuma presidency. And we failed at that point with basic accountability. And I think it was just seemingly impossible due to the power structures and the upward accountability in the party to remove Jacob Zuma when it was very clear that he was negative to the country. So I think what Sikonathi is saying, we're not voting for individuals, we're voting for parties. Parties within the party, you are upwardly accountable to your party structures, you're not accountable to the citizens and the community. These things are difficult to fix structurally. I want to show you some some research that, well, it's not research. I've got a bit of research and I've got a bit of, I suppose, theory that I want to show you because it does really line up with what we're talking about. So I'm just going to share my screen quickly. Just give me a second. So the first bit of research I want to show you that really talks to this accountability thing and the patronage politics and the like. The
Yes.
data that we have come from a local government perspective. So we did a survey in, well, not a survey, a project. We developed a code for ethical leadership in local government. And as part of that, we did significant research to try and understand what causes ethical collapse in local government. And we asked people what makes ethical leadership really difficult in your environment. And yeah, let me just quickly share my screen and the findings
Thank you.
thereof. Okay, right, there it is. So we asked people and we asked councillors, we asked officials, we asked all of them, what makes ethical leadership difficult in your environment? Now, the first thing that came out was political interference, the politicization of local government. And I think we can extrapolate that into the national level as well. When Jacob Zuma was was president, like Sikonathi said, he had to get rid of all of the accountability structures. But what also happened is he got rid of or changed the dynamics of the police system as well, because now the police, and specifically crime intelligence, wasn't there to prevent crime in South Africa. It was there to protect the interests of the Zuma presidency. And the financial and corrupt interests that went with that. So we sort of corrupted the intent of the organization, and other driving forces start playing out in that environment. So the politicization of local government, where we talk about destructive deployment practices, political interference, factionalism, all of that plays in. Then the second thing is councillor governance skills. The people who are supposed to provide oversight don't necessarily have the right skills to ask the right questions and to hold people accountable to the right standards. And then lack of accountability is the next thing, because if we have the people in high places and they are upwardly accountable to someone else, then we start seeing that I, as a director general of a department, can't hold someone accountable because that person is politically protected and therefore my career is in jeopardy. So all of these things play in on each other. And then lastly, what you see when things really collapse is criminal capture. So yeah, supply chain management abuses, politics of the stomach and the like. Now, the following data to me displays where things go wrong the best. So again, in a quantitative survey, we asked people from local government, to what extent do you agree that the following undermines ethical leadership in your environment, in your municipality? And we took those people who said they had adverse or disclaimer audits, and we put them on one side, and we took the others who said that they had clean audits, and we put them on the other side. So now we can see what are the things that most differentiate people with clean audits from people with adverse or disclaimer audits. Now, the thing that stands out the most here is lack of education, skills, and qualification amongst officials, then unlawful instructions from councillors to officials, and then appointment of officials with political connections rather than skills. Now, if these things are blatantly apparent, and we did this research because at one point you couldn't even talk about these things in local government or in any part of government. You couldn't talk about political deployment because people were deployed. That was what it was, and you can't. I remember being involved in a ethics workshop back in 2005, where someone said, "Guys, this is our problem. Our problem is that we are deploying, and deployment. I mean, I don't want to go into the merits of deployment and whether deployment should or shouldn't be working or shouldn't be happening. But the truth is that deployment is very easily corruptible, and very frequently it's just a guise for patronage politics. And
Yes.
once we have patronage politics, we've lost governance, really. Then some other forces are driving our organizations. Let me
Chris,
stop
thank
there.
you. Thank you very much, Chris. I think what you and Sikonathi have highlighted up to this point is really the culture risk politicization in organizations and how it undermines really good governance intent and good governance practices. Now, obviously, Sikonathi, we will move in a few minutes to the issue really dealing with, where to from here. But I think what you and Chris have highlighted is we're also in a year where our local government election is supposed to happen. Now, the coal face of governance happens at a local government level because that's where the largest portion of service delivery happens. So considering what Chris have highlighted in terms of this survey, the research, Sikonathi, perhaps in 2 minutes, how do you think best we need them to look at arresting the situation, possibly or potentially, and learning from what is emerging from these commissions and committees moving forward? Because we are working towards another 5-year cycle of political administration. So what would you recommend, measured against that, we need to learn from in this context?
Firstly, I must thank Chris for that very special and great intervention there. That research you showed there, very well put. I think, Lincoln, what is missing in our society is the first thing. Our electoral system is totally inappropriate. Is totally wrong for the kind of country we are. We went and behaved in terms of choosing an electoral system as if we are the best developed country, we are the most educated and high income earning country. That is totally wrong. You have in this country at the highest levels, which is parliament and in government. Let's start with parliament. You have members of parliament that have no clue why they are there other than just to vote as the party instructs, not what they think, as the party instructs them to, because if they do not, they get a letter from the secretary. They hear from the Speaker of Parliament that they have resigned because the Secretary General of that party, either sitting in Kandla or at Lutuli House or at the Winnie Mandela House, in terms of the EFF, have resigned them without their knowledge. Basically, you get fired for doing your job if you don't toe the line. And that goes to every level of government, provincial and local government. Now, local government is even worse. About 40% of the councillors in KwaZulu-Natal cannot read or write. How do you put such a person at the coalface of delivery? Right now, the ANC is backtracking, saying we will now find the best possible candidates for our mayors. Who will those people work for? Why would you, Lincoln, want to go to a branch meeting and have a discussion about service delivery in a world-class African city such as Johannesburg, such as Cape Town or Durban, where you have to deliver to 6 million people basic services. I don't know when taps bringing water into the households were first discovered, but that is more than 200 years ago. In South Africa, we are unable to deliver water to houses. If you cannot have a discussion with the people that must support you in doing the job as a mayor and as an MMC. And in fact, you yourself are put there because you are going to direct tenders to XYZ, whether or not they're able to do the job. You cannot start. I defy you to show me a chartered accountant who wants to go be a mayor accountable to a person that did not even pass standard 2. And I'm not talking about grade 10 or anything, who did not pass standard 2, but that these are the people that will recall you when they like, whether or not the central party, the leadership has put you there. You are accountable to the people that you have to work with in your region, in your ward. Now, how do you fix that? Give power directly to the people. And we, the people of South Africa, must first accept the responsibility for what this country has become, because our morals and our ethics, we celebrate people who are suddenly so rich and we have no clue where they got their money from. If you ask, excuse me, sir, you got what, 50 million rands worth of vehicles in your garage? How much? Where did you get those? You get accused of policing black wealth. I'm talking about me as a black journalist, a self-hater who does all of those things. But let's go back a bit to officials of the public institutions. Right now at the Madlanga Commission, there's a chief financial officer of a municipality who got his first job as a chief financial officer at age 23, graduating from a university, and he was put overall in charge of the finances. Please look around and tell me there were no chartered accountants that could have done that job this young man had to learn from. The best businesses, their chief executives, take ABSA, for example, a legendary chief executive, Mr. Botha, I'm forgetting his first name, started off as a teller. Go to Nedbank. Mr. Portman started off as a teller. How do you get a 23-year-old coming in charge of the overall finances of the municipality if you want that municipality to succeed, when they have no clue what this business is all about? The people making those appointments obviously have designed them for a particular reason.
Yes.
The people that apply and are qualified to accept jobs to lead Transnet, to lead ESCOM, to lead the SAPS within the police, they do not want them because they will not be useful instruments. Now, we elected those people as the electorate. We have to start by accepting our own accountability, our own responsibility in bringing this mess. Only when we want the best will we turn this country around. Right now, to advance in politics, to advance in government, you have to say yes, and you have to be the stupidest person. You have to allow yourself to be controlled by cartels whose only business is to get money, and there is no accountability whatsoever. We change that, we change the course of the country.
Thank you, Sikonathi. I think you have highlighted in our discussion, and the focus still is on organizational ethics. What corruption inquiries really reveal about organizational ethics? How do we strengthen it? And we have, up to this point now, really discussed institutional capture and ethical collapse. And key, what Chris and Sikonathi has highlighted, is that technical competence cannot be a substitute for incompetence in terms of having the ethical competence as well. It goes in tandem. Recalling what I've highlighted, breaking with the past, the intent was really to elevate moral duty on the same level as having the legal obligations to do the work and function in terms of service delivery in organizations. And this permeates also beyond the confines of the public sector, into the public sector in terms of lessons learned from here. Sikonathi, Chris, thank you. For the second part, how do we move forward rebuilding ethical institutions? And with that, Sikonathi, could you start us off by indicating to us, how did, because there's institutional culture, and Chris has highlighted it with his survey, how did this enable misconduct? And what practical reforms can restore institutional trust, leadership trust, and most important, public trust, as you discuss this? Thank you.
Our biggest problems in the public sector, Lincoln and colleagues, really come from the elected officials and the kind of checks and balances, the mechanisms that we allowed and watched them being destroyed. It doesn't matter what the rules of the organization say. It does not matter how tight the disciplinary process is. If the minister can just phone the chairman or the chief executive and say, that tender will go to that guy, or you are out of there. And if the president, which has happened in this country, calls and says, go assist those guys, give them all the coal tenders they want, and that's it, and nothing happens to them. Does not matter what the internal rules of the organization are, because who can go against the president in such a situation, especially where you cannot go to the police to report this because the police commissioner has been appointed by the president. So let's separate powers and devolve powers back to the professionals and away from the politicians. That is how you fix the thing. You start by selecting the best and step out and let them do their job. One former chairman of ESCOM used a quote, and he was chairman of Telcom at that time. He said, when a certain minister of communications at the time was calling to berate him and tell him he was going to withdraw the SENS announcement that Telcom as a listed company had just published, he said, I'm the biggest shareholder, I'm the majority shareholder here. Why am I the last to hear of this? And it was a SENS announcement on a JSE listed company. He said, he will reverse that announcement. Jabu Mabuza said, listen, ma'am, I am accountable to the shareholders, all of them, and you are a minority shareholder. And by the way, you do not get a dog and do the barking yourself. Don't ever call me again. That is how you deal with it. Let's go even further back. When ESCOM was faced with collapse in the early 80s because of the severe withdrawal of capital and disinvestment from South Africa because of apartheid,
Yes.
President P.W. Botha at the time realized that he's going to lose ESCOM, and at that time, the apartheid policy dictated that electricity was going only to white businesses, white farmers, and the white urban areas. He was desperate to save the company. It had again overbuilt capacity for the customers it had. He went to a man called John Murray, who was the father of Jaco Murray, the former chief executive of Standard Bank, and appointed him as managing director. John Murray said, Mr. President, I will accept this appointment only on one condition. Well, two. One, I will never see you or your minister at my office without my invitation, and I will never take a phone call from you. I will do the job as it is supposed to be done. Do we have a deal? P.W. Botha was the one usually working fingers at people, but his back was to the wall, and he said yes. Jaco Murray went, and the first thing he did was get all the black townships electrified, so that to get the revenue that he wanted, and not a single minister ever visited ESCOM. Today, there will be no results presentation. There will be no state of electricity presentation. There will be no presentation at Transnet or any other institution without the political head responsible. And guess who is with that minister when the minister goes there to make a speech about operational results of a company? The DG is there, so no one is doing the job. There is no separation between the political office and the state. That is not how it works. there must be accountability, separation of powers, and the electorate must get its power back. The whole problem, as far as I am concerned, lies with the incorrect structure that we chose for election. And then we went for all the wrong people. Look back and look now. Give me one very successful minister over the past 30 years in democracy and tell me what they have ever achieved in government. I have my own suspect, and it is one, but I'll invite you to tell me what is the best cabinet minister or even the best state president we have ever had and what they have achieved. I have asked them this question.
Thank you, Sikonathi. I think you have touched the important fact, which I want to hear from Chris. We have, as you know, also Sikonathi, the legislative amendment, Chris, in the public service that devolves and makes sure now that the technocrat, the head of department, has a responsibility to appoint and deal with that HR governance process, because there's always been that overreach. And that's where really that ethical, the issue of ethical drift occurred mostly and caused also this problem. We've seen it also in decision making in the police currently, where there is the issue of accountability is just sided. I read, for example, quickly, just last night, insert that related to the arrest of or the court case of our National Police Commissioner. And one of the political figures highlighted the following, Chris. No one will agree to be an accounting officer because the National Police Commissioner has to account under the PFMA. And this political figure says no one will agree to be an accounting officer. The provision of PFMA holding a director general for the nefarious conduct of junior staff or subordinates is unconstitutional. Now, that is a loaded statement also that can be debated beyond the confines of why we're here. But it speaks to this issue, that understanding what is the responsibility of institutional governance and executive control. Your take on that briefly, Chris. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we're definitely in the right ballpark if we're looking for reasons why things go wrong. The divide between the political and the administrative is a massive issue. So is the position of the Director General, and we just heard that the politicians interfere in the administration very frequently, and it isn't by itself problematic. The problem is that we frequently have the wrong politicians, and they are interfering for the wrong reasons in the administration. Also, they don't necessarily have the competence to understand the strategic long-term imperatives. I think many things go wrong because politicians want to see short-term solutions. They're not necessarily corrupt. We can't say that all politicians are corrupt type of thing, but frequently politicians want to see short-term wins, short-term gains. And that interferes with the long-term building of infrastructure, maintenance of infrastructure, all of the things that go with that. And now there's a dispute between the Director General, and there is very soon you see the Director General quitting or the like. The other problem is that politics is unstable. During Jacob Zuma's tenure, I don't have the stats with me now, but there was something like 170 changes to his cabinet in a 2.5-year period. That means that, and with that, say again, Sikonathi.
Sorry, Sikonathi.
Changes whenever he wanted. It's probably more accurate to say there were changes. I guess my poor connection, please ignore me. I'm saying Jacob Zuma made as many changes as he wanted, whenever he wanted during the night. There were no reasons, no
Yeah,
method. He just
yeah.
Thank you.
chopped and changed.
There's no rationality to it, but the consequence of that is now that the Director General frequently changes as well, because now this politician likes this person because they know them and they know that they are pliable, and they bring in their own leader. Now, if we as the Ethics Institute had to change our CEO every, I think it was 18 months on average. So that means in many places it was a lot less. If you have to change your leadership every 18 months, you are going to have instability and you are going
Yes.
to have non-delivery of service. It the two things are really professionalization and politicization. Those are the two sides of the spectrum. Now, there's two ways we can go about this. The one is that we can try and depoliticize the administration, and the other that we should also be doing is to professionalize the
Sure.
political sphere. So these things have to work together. We have to focus on the core function of the organization. Now, if you appoint people willy-nilly, it means that the core function of the organization is of no concern to you. All that's of concern to you is the political games that you're playing.
Thank you. Chris, Sikonathi, I think the main issue here that we as attendees also, rebuilding ethical state institutions, it speaks to making sure that the technocrat remains the technocrat. Rebuilding also means that, there must be a speak up culture, and that speak up culture is ingrained and part of ethical culture built, the advocacy thereof. Now, it is not a journey in the sense that, start, stop from here to Midrand, but it's a process and it must be led from the top. So I'm always reminded that, even if we talk of building resilient institutions, and this is maybe a 1 minute each that I want you before we go over, how do we build resilient institutions, but it's underpinned by an ethical culture? Sikonathi?
Lincoln, let's start here. Leadership is key. You get the correct driver, the bus driver, and you get the correct passengers. You will reach your destination. But if the driver you've got cannot drive, you're going nowhere. Now, please tell me, if your leader of government cannot himself read or write, cannot even reason, where is Jacob Zuma leading you to? If your leader is Fikile Mbalula, if your leader is Julius Malema, or even what's that, Chris Niehaus, all of them, where are you going? If those are the drivers, can you even put any of those people in the same room with an ambitious and rude and rogue world leader such as Donald Trump? Can you actually protect the interests of South Africa with that kind of leadership? So go back to the beginning again. Elect the correct leaders. If you have a municipal councillor whose only job is to shout down the opposition without offering anything to the debate, there will be no service delivery there. They have been put in there to collect as much money as they possibly can, and that's what we are seeing now.
Thank you.
Go back to the beginning, get the correct leadership.
Leadership
and even
matters.
that leadership still needs accountability.
Thank you. Chris?
Yeah, thanks. I want to show you a slide. I'm quite married to my slides. Sikonathi, I don't talk off the cuff as much. So let me just quickly show you this slide, because I think it captures a lot of what we're talking about. So we did a project many years ago with the Public Service Commission, and it was trying to build a values-driven public sector. And we said, okay, well, what do we need to do? The first thing we need to do as an organization is to agree on our values and principles, or our common purpose. Why are we here, and how are we going to do things? So if you are the Department of infrastructure or something like that, then you are there to build infrastructure. It's a technical competency. Now, the next thing we need to do is then to say, okay, who's going to be the right person to lead this? And we need to develop stable, or appoint stable, capable, and credible leadership, ethical leadership at the end of the day. So things frequently break down there. I think already we see we don't have agreement on the common purpose, and then we are appointing the wrong people. So what we are suggesting as civil society in many instances is that the political appointment of a director general shouldn't be allowed. Well, not allowed, but we made recommendations to the legislation that says that the Public Service Commission gets together an independent panel. That independent panel then, sorry, I just want to, that independent panel then appoints someone, or it gives a short list of 3 people, and they say, these 3 people are the right people. Minister, you are now welcome to choose the one that that you want. So that means we get a competent leader, someone with a technical competence and legitimacy, and now the minister can choose from those. Those things were not incorporated in the legislation. The legislation just says that the minister, the DG, can now appoint the staff that they want to appoint. But the problem is, if the DG doesn't appoint the staff that the minister wants to appoint, then the DG's job is not secure. And we're also saying the Public Service Commission should be getting involved in that role, so that we try to break this hold that politicians have on civil servants. So this again, it's not rocket science. We should be doing this, and it's not. So I just want to quickly go through what we call the public service, or the values-driven public service flywheel. Firstly, our common purpose: stable leadership, stable, credible, ethical, capable leadership. And yeah, we talk about meritocracy. I think we've lost all sense of meritocracy in how we appoint. Then we need to appoint professional and competent staff. Our managers need to provide direction, but also ensure accountability. They need to hold people accountable when things happen, and we're seeing a dearth of accountability in the country. Then what we will see, if we have all of those things in place, and Sikonathi's bus is going to be driving, we're going to start seeing successful delivery of services. What's going to happen next? We're going to start see pride and staff morale increasing. People are actually going to say, well, we've achieved something. This is nice. Currently, people are demotivated because they're not achieving something. So it doesn't matter if we break the rules, because it's not like we're contributing anything anyway. Then you're going to be able to attract more professional and competent staff. That isn't happening at the moment. We're not attracting the best people into the public service because it's not seen as a good environment to operate in. And then that flywheel continues, and we should start seeing things building. But firstly, we need to get this central part, our common purpose. It's frequently a technical thing, and we have de-technicalized government. We've politicized it, and therefore basics like water, electricity, stormwater, roads, things that I was once in a session, and an EFF councillor actually said, you know what, there is no such thing, because we were talking about deployment. And the EFF councillor said there's no such thing as an ANC road or a DA road or an EFF road. There's just a road. We don't need to have political people to build roads. We just need to have people who can build roads.
Thank you very much, Chris. Sikonathi, you know, I think the important part, as I conclude and ask you just to sit back and allow our audience also to engage you, because I don't want to take away the questions. There's an army behind me that needs to. But just a reflection that says we must be impatient with those in public service who see themselves as pen pushers and guardians of rubber stamps, thieves intent on self-enrichment, bureaucrats who think they have a right to ignore the vision of Batupile, who come to work as late as possible, work as little as possible, and knock off as early as possible. 2004 by a former president, it resonates still. And I think this is what you have highlighted in terms of how do we move forward. But that said, it is now time really for giving the opportunity to Fatima to hear what our audience want you to engage you on. I think I also need to highlight that, Fatima, we have our supporters group. The role of the Ethics Institute to the audience really take note that our vision and our mission is really to build ethical societies. And it starts really engaging those that are current active supporters, whether it's an organization or individual, but also those that see, you know, they can link up with us and contribute so that we expand our footprint and engage also on issues of organizational ethics. So we have a QR code. If not, our website is available as flagged by Narisha there. Please avail yourself to it, familiarize yourself with the content, and partner with us on this journey. Fatima, over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Lincoln, and good morning, everyone. Lincoln, perhaps just to start, huge appreciation both to both our panelists and for this interesting, insightful, and very timely discussion given current events. Chris, let's start with you. So appreciation for the data that you have shared and some curiosity from the audience in terms of what are the early signs of governance failures in institutions, some of which you've shared, but how can communities identify these problems? And Chris, I'm going to tag on to that question, a second question, acknowledgement for how well you've put across the data, but then from a solutions perspective, how do we get ourselves out of this mess? Chris, if I can start with you.
Yeah, it's really a tough question. I think there are some structural changes necessary in our landscape, like we said, the appointment processes and the like. And I think bringing technical competency assessments into the appointment process. At the moment, there is technical competency assessment, but it's areas of improvement. So we're not really considering those when we appoint people. How can citizens get involved? It really is a very, very difficult question. We put together a guide for civil society organizations and how they can get involved in combating corruption and the like. But many of these things are quite technical. I think the biggest power that citizens have is, unfortunately, during the election phase. So we've got elections coming up, and the problem is that many people say that one is like the other and it's not going to make a difference and the like. I think, yeah, we need to. That's where the power lies. That's where how the democratic system works, is that your biggest input is during the election phase. Once that has gone, you have other areas of engagement, but not with government institutions, the police, things like that. But with local government, you do have areas of engagement during the IDP process, the Integrated Development Plan process. And when there's something that's going to be built in your area, you can provide oversight of that and say, why is this not happening? There's access to information legislation that helps us. And when there is misspending, we need to make sure that people um, are are held accountable, and there are also legal processes for that. But again, these things are very technical. I think the point where it's most key is when a administration appoints a municipal manager. So in other words, when a council appoints a municipal manager, frequently we know that this person is not fit for purpose, doesn't have the qualifications and the like, but we leave that and we let that go. That is the point of inflection where we can actually start doing something. And I think if everyone focuses their attention on making sure you get the right municipal manager, then we've gone some way. But it's a very, very difficult question to answer, Fatima. It's I think the problem is that we've slipped quite far. The system is quite unstable and broken, and there are forces that make it difficult for people to intervene in those places, and frequently criminal elements.
Thank you, Chris. And maybe tagging on to where you've taken us in terms of the citizens, Sikonathi, if I can pose the question which is directly posed to you, to please comment on the role of the citizens in perpetuating corrupt behavior, mainly through votes. The question quite strongly, Sikonathi, is why do citizens keep voting into power corrupt officials? Madlanka Commission is not introducing anything new, only that we now have faces to this unscrupulous behavior. So Sikonathi, if perhaps you want to, that was directly addressed to you, if you'd like to comment, please.
Fatima, I come from a background where people in 2021, in 2024, are still voting for Nelson Mandela. No one else will be received at a public meeting if they are not showing up umkhonto nevili, which is the spear and the wheel, because of the history. People are still voting against F.W. de Klerk today. So we have a problem.
Sikonathi, I think maybe switch off your camera.
Appreciate its role, its responsibility to the future and to the. Is that better?
Yeah.
Is that better?
Thank you. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. We have an electorate that is not fit for this kind of democracy, for the level of development that we are. As I had said to you, people know exactly what's wrong, but the ANC, which is the government of the day and has been for quite a while, learned one thing from its communist and socialist, and that is what we have received. That is the main reason. If you come in and say, this mayor that we have elected, this councillor, people don't even know who the councillor is, but they only need to threaten them with the loss of the government largesse, the social grants, because you have, again, a huge unemployment problem. Keep them uneducated and untrained, and you own them forever. That is the socialist method of the government, and that's what we have. That is the only answer I can give. The fact that, I mean, that's the only answer I can give. The fact that your children get unemployed as a result of the government policies, the people that are doing the voting are not able to link those two. They do know, of course, that there are huge improvements in certain aspects. Social grants I have mentioned. You have everyone now able to go to university, so that's great. But they do not see that the actions of the people they vote for are the cause of the high unemployment and the poverty, and therefore the violence and corruption we're going through. I don't know if that answers the question, Fatima.
Thank you, Sikonathi. And I think you're really getting to the crust of it and the reality on the ground in terms of the temperature and what triggers voting as part of our reality. But Chris, let me take the question on the other side to you, then directed in terms of what is it that Salga in particular, calling Salga out from given the impending local government elections, and what can political parties do to strengthen the capabilities of leadership and the political will to foster ethical leadership and accountability? Any thoughts from your side, Chris?
Yeah, I think there's a massive responsibility on political parties, and I think political parties are realizing that they cannot simply give popular leaders the space, or populist leaders maybe the space. They need competent ethical leaders as well, because I think even the ANC is realizing that its space is not guaranteed as a leader of government and of municipalities specifically. So there is a massive incentive to now start saying, okay, well, let's find the right leaders. I do always think that we have a problem in that we have career politicians, and if I think about how the system was probably designed, is that people would first distinguish themselves in maybe a professional life. So in other words, you would be a professional accountant or a professional lawyer or even shopkeeper or something, but you distinguish yourself in your community, and then you get asked to become a political leader. What we've got now is a political class where people have no competence and skill in governance, and it creates a huge vacuum then for how we do this. And I think it's difficult to find the right people. I don't think it is just especially in rural areas. We don't sit with massively educated people in rural areas. Those people go to big cities and they find jobs, and I think in the cities we have no excuse, but in the rural areas it really is very difficult to find the right leaders.
Thank you, Chris. Really taking us through the issues of accountability, leadership, but also what drives the way in which voters think and accountability actually happens. Now, I want to take the theme of accountability, and Sikonathi, direct it at you. There are a couple of questions around why now? So when you look at the Zondo Commission and at present the Madlanga Commission, there's a big difference in terms of actual investigations and imminent prosecutions. Sikonathi, directed at you, what is your evaluation of that? Why do you see more action following the Madlanga Commission now than we saw on Zondo? And then a reflection from our colleague Javita. I believe that if trust is not rebuilt via real investment in ethical culture enhancement, the causes and rebuilding of trust will not be achieved. So Sikonathi, maybe to open that up to you to share your reflections on why now? What's the difference? Why more accountability, and just issues around trust? I'll open it up to you, Sikonathi.
Fatima, the main difference with the Zondo Commission and the current commission is that the president did not only just establish the Madlanga Commission now, he also established a police unit to prosecute anyone that has been found to have a case to answer in the Madlanga Commission. You did not have that with the Zondo. IDEC came in later, and then there were arguments about access to the records. Today, the NPA still does not have access to the evidence of the Zondo Commission, or at least there is a dispute there about gatekeepers and stuff. So it would appear, in fact, the people that were found to have cases to answer and recommendations to be prosecuted at the Madlanga Commission, feeling themselves to be unjustly done, they have approached courts to set aside the findings of the commission without being visited by a policeman or a prosecutor in any way. The major flaw, it followed all the culture of commissions of an inquiry in South Africa before that, where the president just sat back and waited for recommendations from the commission. That's what Madlanga did, produced recommendations, but there was no establishment by the government to take on those recommendations. The president just hoped that the NPA would then be able to do its job. This time round, it has appointed a police unit to investigate this, and I submit there should also be a specialized courts to deal with these instances. We had the World Cup here. Now, I'm not that old that I'm the only one that should remember there were specialized cases to deal with crimes affecting the World Cup at the time, which had to be sped through the court process. We don't have that now. I submit that it's not enough for the president to establish the specialist investigating police unit to prosecute the people that are fingered in the commission. Go all the way and set aside a special court, like you have the special commissionized courts, for example, to then deal with these matters. Because what you have, our court system are so clogged that if you go to court today and the matter is not urgent in the definition of urgent court cases, you have 3 years to wait to be heard. We do not have that time. South Africa is in such a difficult position and highly abnormal. The crime is so high, it's abnormal, it needs drastic action on the part of the government. But then again, how do you even ensure prosecutions if the president himself has got cash hidden under the sofas in contravention of the law? It starts all the way at the top.
Thank you, Sikonathi. Really hard-hitting truth, but really speaking to how we keep ourselves accountable and our state institutions accountable. Lincoln, if we have one last question, and then I'll close off from that.
Thank you.
Directed, Chris, and more broadly to the Ethics Institute from Lutando, how can someone confront unethical behavior in the workplace where whistleblowers are victimized? We're seeing every day how whistleblowers' lives are being threatened, safety being threatened. What's the best way to handle this without endangering your job and your safety and your family?
If I'm going to throw that over to Liesl, who's our whistleblowing expert, because it's a difficult question. I think the environment is really, people have fear, and whether they have to have fear in every instance, I don't know, but it's logical. One doesn't want to get involved in things because you've got a family and the like. And I think the problem that we're in society is that we don't trust those in power, and it's making it difficult for people who want to do the right thing to do the right thing. And we need to reclaim that space somehow. And I think that's why, as Sikonathi is saying, this is such an important thing. We need to reclaim that space, and the president we need to establish special courts, because otherwise the space is not going to be ours.
Thanks, Chris. Liesl, from your side on the whistleblowing?
Yes, I can perhaps just answer or add, is that we see that globally, actually, the main reason for people not wanting to blow the whistle is that fear of either losing the job or victimization in one form or the other. And then, of course, it also touches on the families. Now, within an organizational setup, we have to create that safe space for people to speak up. But that is, of course, so much easier said than done. But now we go back to ethical organizational cultures and good governance because frameworks. Because if you have a mature ethical organizational culture, then you will create that safe space where people are actually encouraged to speak up, but where people also know that their reports will be taken seriously. Now, and there are still people that disagree with me, but I really do believe that if we have proper whistleblowing management within an organization, then we will not have your victimization. We will not have that looking out for who is the messenger and not talking about the message. And here again, I often put it on the don't want to say on the shoulders of middle management, but we also see that in the majority of cases, and I'm talking in South Africa, 53% according to last research, is 53% of employees report to their direct manager. Now, the direct managers do not know what to do with whistleblowing reports. And that is where things go wrong. That is where the fear comes in. Because now the middle manager tells, a colleague that, Fatima has blown the whistle and this is what Fatima has said. And then that whole process starts. So Fatima, at the end of the day, it's about proper ethical cultures or effective, mature ethical organizational cultures. It's about people being trained in the organization, and then also our reporters protecting themselves. They have to not tell anyone that they have blown the whistle. And as you know, I can talk the whole day about this, so I will just now keep quiet. Thank you.
Thank you, Liesl. Thank you for that. Lincoln, can I just check with you? I have one last question just on the private sector role, which we haven't touched on yet. If yes. I can nudge that in quickly before I hand back to you. So huge appreciation from the audience to our panelists and for the deep insights that they shared, but a sense that we've talked a lot about the public sector. What is the role of the private sector in curbing corruption and unethical practices? And then also, how should South African organizations, particularly boards, responsibly balance collective responsibility for institutional failures with personal ethical accountability while without creating a culture of fear or blame? And maybe Sikonathi, to come to you on the role of the private sector and any thoughts on that given your work, and Lincoln will end with that one. Sikonathi?
Colleagues, for every person that receives a bribe, there is someone that has given the bribe. And that usually comes from the private sector. Now, since at least 2010, South Africa has created a special kind of private sector, artificial private sector whose business solely is to extract as much money from the government in the form of tenders. And as we have said the past 90 minutes here, that the politicians being in charge have decided who will win tenders. And these are, for all intents and purposes, if we are really talking about a corporate private sector, are special purpose vehicles specifically designed to extract and not really to deliver any services. When you talk about private sector, we ordinarily would be expecting to be talking about established companies that employ hundreds of thousands of people who are the biggest employers in this country. You can name the banks, you can name the mining companies, but what we have had is a new cadre of tenderpreneur, an opportunist who is not a business person, but only just knows how to make money. And how to make money is to go bribe, starting the president. I mean, you have give the current two presidents look at Jacob Zuma's tax problems with SARS, and you only need to read a book, The President's Keepers, if you don't have time. You look at our current president, his problems, his troubles with the law with regards to Palapala. If you have that kind of leadership, and they all have active benefactors, they all have to run to people to request funding. So they create a pipeline of funding going through to certain companies. News 24 publishes almost on a monthly basis stories about Paul Mashatile and how rich the man is without any apparent and transparent source of revenue, all revolving around shadowy business people. That is what we have now unfortunately called the private sector. It is not, it is an artificial pipeline to fund corruption.
Thank you, Sikonathi. Thank you for those deep insights. Lincoln, unfortunately, that's all we have time for. I'll hand over to you. Thanks very much.
Fatima, thank you very much. To our guest speakers, to start off with Sikonathi, gratitude, great appreciation for a robust, frank contribution. You are appreciated and acknowledged. To Chris, sincere thanks. You know, flagging even the surveys and studies done gives just impetus to the importance of us needing to move forward. Because ultimately, what we have realized in this deliberation is that our national security is compromised. Why? Because our national security stewards and institutions are compromised. And the current situation needs to be addressed so that we can really ensure that societies, communities are safe, but that there's also investment with ease of mind to ensure that our social development programs and agenda is giving impetus to. No business would want to venture into an environment where it finds these challenges. So it requires really the underpinning of institutions going forward, that hopefully we have resilient institutions underpinned by ethical culture, because it does not mean that if we build resilient institutions, ethical culture emerges automatically. It is work, and it requires each one of us really to put shoulders to the wheel in realizing that. And as we bring this webinar to close, it is really clear that the judicial commissions of inquiry is a reality of our democratic governance process, but it cannot be substituting institutional governance responsibilities. Ultimately, leaders have to govern, they have to lead. And we have leading practice standards, we have the legislation. It is really to give effect thereto. What also came out that needs to be reinforced is really to professionalize public service. Because ultimately, if the mantra is echoed, it will just remain words on papers if we do not give effect to that. And I think there was so much discussed that we realize the key takeaway from today is that ethical drift is damaging. And we have a responsibility in that regard. So from my side, before I hand over to our CEO, can I just conclude and say appreciation to our speakers once more for sharing valuable perspectives. And we thank all you participants from foreign and near for your active participation. May the shared knowledge, experience, and ideals allow us all paying it forward in our respective organizations with the ultimate goal to contribute in fostering ethical cultures that are not just compliant, but also principled and sustainable. With that, thank you, CEO, Dr. Liesel Groenewald.
Thank you so much.
If I can just interject first, I would just like to say to Sikonathi, it's a massive privilege to be on the panel. I think that the media is doing a very courageous and essential job in this landscape, and just to acknowledge that and say a huge privilege to be on this with you. Thank you.
On behalf of my colleagues, thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Sikonathi. And there isn't really much left for me to say. I can just see so much appreciation in all the hands that are coming up, and the thumbs up, and the hands clapping, and the applause, and the hearts. So, Lincoln, thank you very much for leading this discussion. And Sikonathi and Chris, Sikonathi is sitting on the edge of his chair this whole webinar, I think, because he's also busy with the court cases that's happening there, that the very competent investigative team of News 24 is handling today. And then Chris for having had 10 minutes of notice to be part of this webinar. Thank you. And Fatima and Nirisha in the back, thank you so much. And then to each and every one of you, thank you for being here. Thank you for your comments. And I wish you a wonderful day and evening further. Bye-bye from our side.